In this video, we're going to look at compound inequalities, specifically just graphing compound and inequalities. So a compound inequality is two inequalities put together. Just like a compound word, two things put together. So we're looking at two inequalities. Now this type that we're looking at today called and inequalities, now these are true if both of the inequalities are true that make up the compound inequality. And because we're just doing graphing today, we're going to graph both of these inequalities on the same number line, but we're only going to shade where the two graphs overlap. So these are also called intersections, but for these notes we're just going to refer to them as and inequalities. The reason we do that is because we use the word and when we write them. So our first example, we have x is greater than -3 and x is less than or equal to 5. So the way you want to start these, just put those two numbers on the number line, like this, just sort of in order, right? Make sure -3, which is less than 5, goes on the left. You can put 0 here as a marker or not. Doesn't really matter. And so we want to consider the individual inequalities first, and then we can actually graph where they would overlap. So for greater than -3, that's going to go this way if we were to shade that one. Less than or equal to 5 would go this way if we were to shade only that one. And they overlap here between the two numbers. So that's where we're going to shade our actual graph. So for less than -3, that's an open circle on -3. For greater than or equal to 5, that's a filled in circle on 5. And the shading is between the two, because that is where the overlap was when we looked at each one individually. So greater than -3 goes this way, less than or equal to 5 goes this way, and the overlap is in between. For example B, we have x is greater than or equal to 3 and x is greater than 6. So let's go ahead and put those numbers on here. Now writing the portion we're doing here in blue is sort of like showing your work. You don't have to do it. If you can visualize it in your head, that's fine, but it does help to write it down. So greater than or equal to 3 is going to go to the right like this. Greater than 6 goes from the right like this. And again, we're only shading the overlap in this case, which is everything to the right of 6. So we have an open circle at 6 for greater than, right, for that symbol, and we're going to shade to the right. Nothing here actually gets shaded over by the 3 because it's not part of the compound inequality solution. Even though we would have a filled in circle on 3, if we actually put that on the graph, that would mean that we have everything greater than 6 and a point at 3, which we don't have. So this is how we would graph this one right here. Let's look at example C. We have x is less than -4 and x is greater than 2. Let's go ahead and put those on here. We got -4 and 2. Now let's consider each inequality separately. Less than -4 goes less than to the left like this. Greater than 2 goes to the right. But we only want to graph where these two things overlap. And if you look at these graphs, they do not overlap. There are no numbers that are both less than -4 and greater than 2. Because that's what we're doing. We're shading in all the numbers that satisfy both inequalities. Right? For example, A, it was all the numbers between -3 and 5. So all the numbers greater than -3 and less than or equal to 5. For example, B, it was all the numbers greater than 6 because that's the overlap of greater than or equal to 3 and greater than 6. For example, C, there is no overlap. There are no numbers that satisfy both of these inequalities. And so when this happens, we have no solution. There is no number that makes both of those inequalities true. Now example D, this is a special way to write an and inequality where it's all pushed together like this. And you could split this up into two different ones. X is greater than -1 and x is less than 8. But you can see this one's open to x, so greater than -1. And this one is closed to x, less than 8. But to graph this, we just put those two numbers on. -1 here and 8 here. put the correct circles on the numbers based on the inequality. So these are both open circles. And we're going to shade all the numbers for x that are between -1 and 8. So we just shade in the middle like this. So there you have it. Really quick notes on graphing compound and inequalities. So remember, you're shading all the numbers that make both of the inequalities true.